Now, joining me in studio to discuss this further is Mr. Tsepo Khadima. He is a political analyst. Also in studio, Mr. Sydney Sekese, certified financial planner and FPI member. Are you at home? Welcome to join in the conversation. Our Twitter handle at ANN7TV. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us. For a very good evening to you.
Good evening.
Mr. Khadima, I'll start with you. Is there a need for another private bank in South Africa, and does it also help when it comes to competition, in the banking sector, the rates that people are charged, and just do we really need this? Is this an advantage to the banking sector?
The simple answer is yes. We need more players into the banking space. We should welcome the licensing of Discovery Bank, as it will be called. But at the same time, we should call upon the South African Reserve Bank to do a lot more in processing other applications, because certainly I think we have got a concentration of players amongst very few institutions, banking institutions at the moment, and that certainly has not been good for our economy. I know that the Reserve Bank argues otherwise, but it has not been good for our economy because we still have a larger population that is either underbanked or completely excluded. And financial exclusion is what, in fact, the Constitution demands of the state to have to ensure. And if there was anything, I would say that the process of approving banking license applications is just far too long. That certainly cannot be good for encouraging investment to go into the financial and banking industries, with the licensing application processes taking this much longer. And why the post office? I would have thought that at the same time that they were announcing the licensing of Discovery Bank, at least we should have had some update, or if anything, the announcement of the approval of the long-awaited post bank or a post office bank, which will be full spectrum of banking services, because that is the key thing. You need a full spectrum of banking services, from retail banking, which is what ordinary people like us would go into a bank or make use of those services, to corporate and investment banking, because again, we need more capital to go in towards growing this economy. And the current existing banks are just not able to finance the demands and the needs we have in our economy to grow.
And what criteria is used to award such licenses, Mr. Sekese? Perhaps you could help us with that. I'm not sure of the dates on when Discovery applied for their license and when Postbank applied for their license, but it appears the Postbank licensing could still be lingering. What do they look into, when they approve such licenses?
Sure. Thanks for the opportunity, Audrey. I think the key thing is in terms of capital adequacy, and because we're dealing with trust, and also the community needs to be confident that should there be calamity in the market, the bank will be able to do their promises, because banks are regarded as a safe haven, and historically they've provided whatever you put in, you get out with some interest. So I think one key requirement is how capitalized is the institution before they really approve that license, and also in terms of the stability and their track record in terms of meeting client
But do they
objectives.
also look at the layman on the street, the person that is banking with these banks, how it benefits them, what policies are put into place to make sure this is a win-win situation, or is that even an option? Because I'll tell you, I've tried to get a loan, and it is just the most horrific experience, the kind of information and documents that they ask from you, and still you may not even be successful to get a loan. How do we improve, the issue of transformation, small to medium enterprises trying to get loans to start their business, and how obviously this feeds into the economy in the bigger picture, Mr. Khadima? Because I'll tell you, they are, of course you would know this, it is the most difficult part of our community to get any kind of loans from the current banks that we have.
Yeah, I mean, I would talk about business financing or ease of businesses, and specifically small, medium-sized enterprises, access to capital for working capital purposes, for pre-production finance or expansion finance that they need. That is an area which for a very long time, I think the existing fewer banks, they just don't have the capacity to employ people and build capacity to be able to interrogate and do diligence on those applications to know what would fail and what would be able to succeed in order to be able to grant funding. So if anything, because of this concentration that we have seen of not allowing more players to come into the market, we of course have seen that the existing banks, they cherry pick. They go for low-hanging fruit, and low-hanging fruit will be a much larger company that it's a lot more easier for them either to approve an overdraft facility, which will be an unsecured facility by and large. And, but the small, medium-sized enterprises, which really the hope for our economy to be able to grow sustainably lies with the small, medium-sized enterprises. But unless we can be able to provide financial and banking access for the small, medium-sized enterprises, is going to be exceedingly difficult for us to be able to achieve the level of sustainable growth that we so much need as a country. So if anything, when you look at the criteria that they're applying, of course, on the other hand, we've seen over the last few years that there's been a proliferation of other financial service providers who their interest rate that they are charging is just downright, it's
daylight robbery.
It's daylight robbery. That's really the way to put it, where people are paying up to 28, 32% interest on the, and more so for loans which are for consumption and not for productive purposes. So if anything, we need banks that can get into this space to provide facilities, banking facilities and loan facilities for productive purposes. And that's really why the small, medium-sized enterprises is really the market that currently it is untapped, and hence we are having the slow growth that, in our economy that we are seeing. So if that can be freed up, but the Reserve Bank, that is their chief mandate, to ensure that they can be able to license enough players. Now, if you know the criteria, and that in terms of capital adequacy, as Mr. Seges is pointing out, that, for example, for a license, I need to put up 250 million rand, which I think is going to be increasing on deposit with the Reserve Bank, and then I need to build infrastructure. Of course, Discovery Bank, who we are talking about this night, they're going to be investing somewhere in the order of 2 billion, 2.1 billion.
Right.
So 250 million of that will be just the privilege of having a license, which is a deposit paid with the Reserve Bank. The rest will be, of course, building up the infrastructure, the footprint, and the technology. But going forward, if I look at where really the world is gone, and in terms of the world of banking, I believe that it should no longer be that the barrier to entry is no longer as high as it would have been 10, 15 years ago. Technologically, there's been so much advancements that effectively we should be able to have new banks that can enter the market with, of course, meeting the capital adequacy requirements, but at the same time without having to go the bricks and mortar route that normally takes the bulk of the investment that would be required. But the technology is actually an enabler. And as we go into that space, we need more players.
You know, is it the South African Reserve Bank's hands are still a bit tied? We're not seeing this licensing being approved. There has been a call for a state-owned bank. There has been a call for black-owned banks. I mean, how does this assist in easier banking, you know, when it comes to the average man? Mr. Seges?
Yeah, I also need to point out that we should also recall the global financial crisis, which happened in 2008. It was solely because of lax banking processes or systems. And Mr. Khalima spoke about unsecured lending. So I think the Reserve Bank needs to be careful to curb that kind of risk, which will be detrimental to the man in the street, the one that we're trying to get access to. So easy loans could be accessible, but in terms of structuring those kind of banking products needs to be stringent in terms of curbing the potential risk.
Yeah, well, we'll have to leave it there. We're completely out of time for this segment. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time and your analysis. Was certainly appreciated. Mr. Tsepo Khatemare joining me in studio, political analyst, and Mr. Sekese Sydney Sekese as well. He is an FPI member and a certified financial planner. We'll have to move on to our other stories now. Several flights at the low-cost airline Mango were delayed on Monday. This follows a strike action by the airline's pilots. Passengers had to be reportedly reassigned to other airlines. This after Solidarity and Mango management last night failed to reach an agreement over salary negotiations for the pilots and some first officers of the airline. Solidarity is crying foul that their qualified members are being underpaid. Meanwhile, the airline is underplaying the impact that this strike has had. They say it's business as usual and all customers were attended to.
We've just had to reschedule flights, to make sure that we could operate all the flights with what we had available. That's really the reason why we had to reschedule, to make sure that we have an complete operational day and can operate all the flights that we have. Obviously we didn't have all the pilots on, that we would normally have, and that's really the reason, so we rescheduled this. We've had no protest. I don't know where that comes from, but we had this morning, our operations were normal. I mean, you're at the airport now, you can see whether there's an issue or no issue, but our operations continued as normal this morning. We have had some disruption, obviously, because we've had to reschedule some flights in order to provide the service, but all of our customers have been taken either at their destinations where they intended to be or they're on their way. So our operations have not been disrupted to a very, very large degree, and so it's not business as usual, but it's not business unusual.
Most pilots at Mango Airline affiliated to Solidarity Union have tabled these demands. Workers seek 8.5% salary increase, while employer offers a 6% increase. Solidarity says these pilots are paid below industry standards.
Well, Solidarity started negotiating with the company 4 months ago. But the company came with its initial offer of 6% and never moved from that offer. Solidarity did on several occasions move the offer, and currently we are requesting a 8.5% increase. The reason why we ask 8.5, we've got a report from PE corporate consultants that the market are paying between 23 and 40% more. So Mango pilots and first officers are receiving between 23 and 40% less than the South African market. And that is the reason why we are requesting an 8.5% increase.
The Transport Minister, Joe Maswanganye, published the increased transaction fee, which will be charged on vehicle licensing transactions applicable with effect from the 1st of February in 2018. The transaction fee is charged over and above the actual vehicle licensing fee, which goes to the registering authority, and it is payable to the Road Traffic Management Corporation. In previous years, the former Minister of Transport, Dipo Peters, increased this transaction fee from 36 rands to 42 rands per transaction, an increase of 16.67%. Now, the latest published transaction fee exceeds the current inflation rate by almost 15 times. Now, let's take a closer look at the licensing fee increase. The vehicle licensing transaction fees are increasing by 30 rands, from 42 rands to a new fee of 72 rands. Now, this is a whopping 71.43% increase, which will be effective from the 1st of February 2018.
We've called upon the Minister of Transport to come and justify this, given the fact that this is a massive hike in the transaction fees that are levied on each basis transactions. And the Minister didn't, at the time of publishing his drafted new promulgated fees, offer any explanation at all, let alone a reasonable one. Quite frankly, the Minister owes the public not an apology, but an explanation at the very least as to what this is all about. And, if he doesn't do so, well, then we'll leave it to the public to do what is necessary.